beloved listeners, dear seekers of wisdom, respected members of this extraordinary family. I welcome you with an open heart and profound gratitude. You've chosen to spend these precious moments not chasing quick fixes or shortcuts, but pursuing something deeper, something that most people never discover because they're too busy looking for magic when the real magic has been hiding in plain sight all along. You are here for a reason, and that reason is about to change everything. There exists a force so powerful that it has created every fortune worth having, built every legacy worth remembering, and transformed every ordinary life into something extraordinary. It works silently, invisibly, relentlessly. Most people learn about it in mathematics class and forget it by lunch. But those who truly understand it, they don't just become wealthy. They become inevitable. Let me take you back to a conversation that changed how I see everything. I was sitting across from an elderly woman in a modest home on the outskirts of Omaha. Her name was Eleanor, and she'd asked to meet me because she wanted to show me something. Something she said would surprise me. Eleanor was 87 years old. She'd worked as a librarian her entire life, never made more than $35,000 a year, never inherited money, never won the lottery, never got lucky with a hot stock tip, and yet sitting there in her living room, surrounded by well-worn books and family photographs, she handed me a statement that showed a net worth of over $4 million. I looked at her, confused. "Eleanor," I said, "how is this possible? The mathematics don't seem to work." She smiled, the kind of smile that holds decades of quiet wisdom. "That's because you're thinking in addition," she said. "But I've been living in multiplication." Those words, those simple words, they contained everything, because most people go through life adding income, adding savings, adding effort, 1 + 1 + 1, linear growth, predictable, safe, slow. But Eleanor had discovered something that most Harvard graduates never grasp. She'd discovered how to apply compound interest not just to her money, but to everything, to her knowledge, to her relationships, to her health, to her character, to her entire existence. And the results were almost magical. Except it wasn't magic, it was mathematics. The most powerful mathematics in the universe applied to the most important investment you'll ever make, your life itself. You see, dear friends, when Einstein supposedly called compound interest the most powerful force in the universe, people thought he was talking about money. But he wasn't. Not really. He was talking about the principle, the pattern. The way small actions repeated consistently over time don't just add up, they multiply. They explode. They create results that seem impossible to anyone who doesn't understand exponential growth. Let me explain what Eleanor understood. When you save $1,000 and earn 10% interest, you don't just have $1,100 next year. You have $1,100 that can now earn interest on itself. The next year, you're not earning interest on 1,000. You're earning it on 1,100. And the year after that on 1,210. The numbers seem small at first, trivial almost, but give it time, give it decades, and something extraordinary happens. But here's what Eleanor knew that changed everything. That same pattern applies to reading. Every book you read doesn't just add to your knowledge. It multiplies it, because the insights from one book combine with insights from another, creating new understanding you couldn't have found in either book alone. 10 books don't give you 10 times more wisdom than one book. They give you exponentially more. The same with relationships. Every meaningful connection you build doesn't just add one person to your network. It multiplies your opportunities because that person knows people who know people who know people. One genuine friendship nurtured over decades can create more value than 1,000 superficial contacts made yesterday. The same with skills. Every hour you spend practicing doesn't just add to your ability. It compounds with every previous hour, making each new hour more valuable than the last. The difference between someone who practices something for 1 hour a day for 10 years versus someone who practices 10 hours once isn't 10 to 1. It's exponential. It's transformative. It's the difference between competence and mastery. But most people never experience this magic. You want to know why? Because they don't give it time. They don't understand that compound interest, real compound interest, is invisible at first, frustrating even. You put in effort and the results seem pathetically small. You save money and watch it grow, at what feels like a snail's pace. You read books and wonder if you're really getting smarter. You invest in relationships and question whether it matters. This is where almost everyone quits. Right at the beginning. Right when the compounding hasn't had time to work its magic. They're looking for addition when they should be building multiplication. They want to see dramatic results today when the real results won't appear for years, sometimes decades. Let me tell you about a young man I met named James. He came to me frustrated, burned out, feeling like a failure at 32. He'd been working hard his entire adult life, putting in long hours, trying to get ahead, but he felt stuck. His income had plateaued, his savings were modest, his career felt stagnant. He looked at friends who seemed to be racing ahead and wondered what he was doing wrong. I asked him a simple question. James, what have you been compounding? He looked at me blankly. What do you mean? I said. Are you doing the same things over and over? Or are you building on what you learned yesterday to be better today? Are you accumulating random experiences? Or are you deliberately stacking skills that multiply each other's value? Are you busy, or are you compounding? The silence that followed was profound, because James, like most people, had been confusing activity with compound growth. He was working hard, yes, but he was working hard at things that didn't compound, things that reset every day, things that added but never multiplied. He was taking jobs based on immediate income rather than long-term skill development. He was learning things at random rather than building a deliberate stack of related competencies. He was meeting people opportunistically rather than nurturing deep relationships over time. He was adding, but nothing was compounding. So I gave him an assignment. For the next 5 years, I said, I want you to make every decision through one filter. Will this compound? Will the effort I put in today make tomorrow's efforts more valuable? Will this skill multiply the value of skills I already have? Will this relationship grow stronger with time? Will this investment in myself pay dividends for decades? James was skeptical. 5 years seemed like forever. He wanted results now. But something in my words must have resonated because he agreed to try. I didn't hear from him for nearly 6 years. Then one day I received a letter. James wrote to tell me that his life was unrecognizable, not because of one big break, not because he'd gotten lucky, but because everything had started to compound. He'd spent those years deliberately building a stack of complementary skills in technology and communication. Each skill made the others more valuable. He'd nurtured a small group of meaningful relationships, and those people had opened doors he never knew existed. He'd invested his money consistently in low-cost index funds, and the growth had accelerated in ways that shocked him. He'd read 2 books a month, every month, and the knowledge had compounded into a kind of wisdom he couldn't have imagined. His income had quadrupled. But that wasn't what struck me about his letter. What struck me was the tone. He wasn't stressed anymore. He wasn't frantically chasing. He'd discovered the peace that comes from understanding compound growth. Because when you understand compounding, you stop worrying about daily fluctuations and start trusting the process. You stop comparing yourself to others and start focusing on your own trajectory. You stop seeking instant gratification and start playing the long game. This is the shift I want you to understand, beloved friends. Because most of the anxiety in your life, most of the frustration, the disappointment, the feeling of being behind, it comes from thinking in addition when you should be thinking in multiplication. It comes from measuring progress in days when you should be measuring in decades. It comes from not understanding that tiny improvements, sustained over time, don't just add up, they explode. Think about your health for a moment. If you improve your health by just 1% a day, not 10%, not 20%, just 1 measly percent, in a year, you're not 1% better or even 365% better. You're 37 times better. That's the power of compounding. But you have to do it every day, and you have to be patient enough to let it work. 1% better every day sounds insignificant. It feels like nothing is happening. This is why people quit. They exercise for a week and expect transformation. They eat well for a month and get frustrated when they're not completely different. They're looking for addition when they're actually building multiplication. They just can't see it yet. I remember when I first started the practice of reading for an hour every day. People asked me what I was hoping to achieve. I told them I was compounding my knowledge. They didn't understand. They thought I was just reading books. But I understood that every hour wasn't just adding information. It was creating connections, building frameworks, developing judgment. Each book made the next book more valuable because I could understand it more deeply. Each insight multiplied the value of previous insights. 50 years later, I can tell you, that 1 hour a day compounded into something that changed my entire life. Not because any single book was magical, but because decades of consistent, daily reading created a kind of wisdom that can't be built any other way. You can't cram compound interest. You can't shortcut it. You can't fake it. You can only build it, brick by brick, day by day, year after year. And here's the beautiful secret that Eleanor understood, that James eventually learned, that I hope you'll embrace. Once you start something compounding, it keeps going. It has momentum. It has its own power. The hardest part is the beginning. The first year, the first 5 years, when you're putting in effort and seeing minimal results, when it feels pointless, when everyone else seems to be getting ahead faster with their additions while you're waiting for your multiplication to kick in. But if you persist, if you trust the mathematics, something magical happens. The curve turns, the exponential kicks in, and suddenly you're not just ahead, you're in a different universe. You're experiencing growth that the adders can't even comprehend because they've never experienced exponential change. They're still thinking linearly while you're living logarithmically. Let me tell you about a decision I made 60 years ago that still pays dividends today. I decided to build a reputation for absolute integrity. Not because it would pay off next week or next year, but because I understood that reputation compounds. Every time you keep your word, you don't just add one data point to your character. You multiply the trust people have in you. Every time you act with integrity, even when it's costly in the short term, you're compounding your reputation. 60 years later, I don't need to convince people of my honesty. My reputation does that for me. I don't need to prove my word is good. Decades of consistency have proven it. That's compound interest applied to character, and it's created more value than any individual business deal ever could have. But you have to be willing to make the right decision today, even when the payoff won't come for decades. You have to be willing to invest in your future self, even when your present self gets nothing in return. You have to understand that the person you are today is receiving the compounded gifts of decisions you made 5, 10, 20 years ago. And the person you'll be in 5, 10, 20 years is depending on the decisions you make today. This is how you think when you understand compound interest. This is how you live when you understand exponential growth. You stop asking, "What can I get today?" and start asking, "What will this become in a decade?" You stop seeking instant results and start building systems that multiply over time. You stop adding and start compounding. Think about learning a language. The first 100 words are grueling. You're memorizing, struggling, feeling like you'll never be fluent. But if you persist, something incredible happens. Each new word becomes easier to learn because it connects to words you already know. Grammar patterns you've seen before help you understand new patterns faster. Your ear becomes attuned to the sounds. Your brain starts thinking in the language. What started as painful addition transforms into beautiful multiplication. The person who studies for 1 hour a day for a year will be exponentially more fluent than the person who studies for 365 hours in 1 month. Because compounding requires time. It requires consistency. It requires patience. But the results are incomparable. Or think about writing. Your first essay is terrible. Your 10th essay is slightly less terrible. Your 100th essay is decent. But your 1000th essay, it's not just 1,000 times better than your first. It's exponentially better. Because each essay taught you something, and those lessons compounded. Your vocabulary multiplied. Your sense of rhythm developed. Your ability to structure arguments deepened. You didn't just write more. You became more. That's compounding. This applies to everything, dear friends. Everything. Meditation, fitness, cooking, parenting, leading, creating. Every single endeavor in human life follows the same pattern. Small actions repeated consistently compound into extraordinary results, but only if you're patient enough to let them work. Eleanor, that librarian with $4 million, she understood this at a level that most wealthy people never reach. She didn't just compound her money. She compounded her wisdom by reading every day. She compounded her relationships by being the kind of friend people could count on for decades. She compounded her peace of mind by living below her means and never taking on debt. She compounded her health by walking every morning and eating simply. And all of these things, all of these different areas of compounding, they multiplied each other. Her health gave her the energy to read. Her reading gave her the wisdom to build better relationships. Her relationships brought joy that reduced stress and improved her health. Her financial security allowed her to be generous, which deepened her relationships. Everything compounded everything else. This is the ultimate insight. Compound interest isn't just about money. It's a way of living. It's a philosophy. It's about understanding that your life is not a collection of separate events, but an interconnected system where improvements in one area multiply improvements in others, where the whole becomes far greater than the sum of its parts. But to access this power, you have to make a fundamental shift in how you think about time. You see, most people are terrible with time. Absolutely terrible. They overestimate what they can do in a day and underestimate what they can do in a decade. They want transformation by Friday, but won't commit to improvement for 5 years. They're impatient with the process, but then shocked when 10 years later, they're exactly where they were, still adding, never multiplying. Understanding compound interest means developing what I call time vision. It's the ability to see beyond the immediate, to look at a small action today and envision what it becomes after 1,000 repetitions, to plant a seed and see the forest, to make an investment and see the legacy. Let me share a practice that changed everything for me. Every Sunday evening, I would sit down with a notebook and ask myself 3 questions. First, what did I do this week that will compound? Second, what did I do this week that was just noise, activity without multiplication? And third, what can I start this week that, in 10 years, I'll be grateful I began today? These questions forced me to think exponentially. They made me conscious of whether I was building compound growth or just staying busy. And over time, this practice itself compounded, because each week I got better at identifying what truly multiplies versus what merely adds. Each week I got clearer about my priorities. Each week I eliminated more noise and invested more in what compounds. Try this yourself, beloved listeners. Tonight, before you sleep, ask yourself, if I keep doing what I did today for the next 10 years, where will I be? Not where you hope to be, not where you wish to be, but where the mathematics of your current habits will actually take you. This is usually a sobering question, because most people realize they're not on a compounding trajectory. They're on a plateau, or worse, a decline. But here's the beautiful thing about exponential growth. You can start anytime. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. The same applies to everything that compounds. Yes, you've lost some years, but you haven't lost the principle. You can begin compounding today, right now, this moment. I want to tell you about a woman named Patricia who understood this at a level that moved me deeply. She came to one of my talks when she was 58 years old. Afterwards, she approached me with tears in her eyes. "I've wasted so much time," she said. "I'm almost 60 and I haven't built anything that compounds. No investments, no skills, no meaningful relationships. I've just been surviving, adding days to days, and now I'm almost out of time." I looked at this woman and I saw profound regret. But I also saw something else, potential, because she was still here, still breathing, still capable of starting. "Patricia," I said, "you are not out of time. You might have 20 or 30 years ahead of you, maybe more. That's enough for extraordinary compounding if you start today. The question isn't whether you wasted the past. The question is whether you'll waste the future." She asked me where to start, and I told her the same thing I'll tell you now. Start with the smallest possible action that you can sustain forever. Not a dramatic gesture, not a radical transformation, not a New Year's resolution that will collapse by February. The smallest possible improvement that you can make every single day without fail. For Patricia, it was walking for 15 minutes every morning and reading for 15 minutes every evening. That's it. 30 minutes a day. Anyone can find 30 minutes, but she committed to making it non-negotiable, to letting it compound. I saw her again 5 years later. She was 63, and she was unrecognizable. Not just physically, though she'd lost weight and looked vibrant, but in her energy, her presence, her confidence. She told me that the walking habit had compounded into a love of hiking. The reading habit had compounded into joining a book club, which had compounded into meaningful friendships. Those friendships had compounded into new opportunities. She'd started a small consulting business based on knowledge she'd gained from reading. That business had compounded into financial security she'd never known before. You were right, she told me. 5 years felt like forever when I started, but now it feels like 5 minutes, and the compounding. Once it started working, it was like everything got easier. Like momentum was carrying me forward instead of me pushing uphill. This is the turning point in compound growth that most people never reach. The moment when it tips. When the exponential curve goes vertical. When your efforts start multiplying themselves without additional input. When the system becomes self-sustaining. But you have to survive the early years. The brutal, discouraging, seemingly pointless early years when you're putting in effort and seeing minimal results. This is where character is built. This is where you prove to yourself that you understand the mathematics, even when you can't see the results yet. Think about it like pushing a giant flywheel. At first, it barely moves. You push and push and push, and it creeps forward inch by inch. It feels impossible. But each push adds momentum. Each rotation makes the next one slightly easier. And if you keep pushing consistently, patiently, eventually something magical happens. The flywheel starts moving on its own. Your pushes become less necessary because momentum has taken over. That's compound interest reaching critical mass. I learned this lesson with investing early in my life. I remember putting away small amounts of money and watching them grow at what felt like a pathetically slow pace. Friends were making quick money in schemes and speculation. They'd mock my patience. "You're wasting your time," they'd say. "That's never going to amount to anything meaningful." But I understood something they didn't. I understood that consistency beats intensity. That time in the market beats timing the market. That small amounts, invested regularly over decades, would compound into something extraordinary. And I was willing to look foolish for years to be wise for a lifetime. 30 years later, those friends who made quick money, most of them had lost it just as quickly. Because money that comes from addition can be subtracted just as easily. But money that comes from compounding, it has roots, it has depth, it has staying power. Because it was built on principle, not luck. On mathematics, not magic. And here's what I want you to understand about applying compound interest to your entire life. It's not just about the results. It's about who you become in the process. Because the person who can delay gratification for decades develops a kind of character that can't be built any other way. The person who can stay consistent when no one is watching develops integrity that's unshakable. The person who can trust the process when they can't see the results develops faith that transforms everything. Patricia didn't just get healthier and wealthier and more connected. She became someone entirely different. Someone with patience. Someone with discipline. Someone with vision. The compounding happened in her bank account, yes. But more importantly, it happened in her soul. Let me tell you about another principle of compounding that most people miss. It's what I call compound interest on compound interest. This is when you take something that's already compounding and you compound it again by sharing it, teaching it, or applying it in new domains. For instance, let's say you've spent 10 years building expertise in a field. That expertise has compounded. You know more than someone who just studied for 10 hours because your knowledge has been building on itself. Now, what if you start teaching that expertise? Suddenly you're compounding in a new direction. Teaching forces you to clarify your thinking, to organize your knowledge, to discover gaps you didn't know existed. Each time you teach, you learn more deeply. Your expertise compounds faster because you're not just practicing, you're explaining. But it goes further. The people you teach go out and apply your knowledge in ways you never imagined. They come back with insights you didn't have. They ask questions that make you think differently. Your knowledge begins compounding through other people's experiences. This is exponential growth on exponential growth. This is multiplication of multiplication. I've experienced this throughout my partnership over the decades. We didn't just compound our individual knowledge. We compounded our combined knowledge. Every conversation multiplied our understanding. Every decision we analyzed together created insights neither of us could have reached alone. The partnership itself became a compounding machine more powerful than either of us individually. This is why the richest people in history have always understood the power of collaboration, of building institutions, of creating systems larger than themselves. Because when you can get compound interest working, not just for you but through networks of people, through organizations, through ideas that spread, the growth becomes almost unimaginable. But it all starts with you, with your willingness to make the small, consistent choices that compound, with your ability to resist the temptation of immediate gratification in favor of delayed but multiplied rewards, with your courage to look foolish today to be wise tomorrow. I want you to think about your current habits right now, not your goals, not your dreams, your actual daily habits, because your habits are the most powerful compounding engines in your life. A habit is simply a behavior repeated so often it becomes automatic. And automatic behaviors compound whether you're conscious of them or not. If you have a habit of learning something new every day, that compounds into wisdom. If you have a habit of moving your body every day, that compounds into health. If you have a habit of saving a portion of every dollar, that compounds into wealth. If you have a habit of being kind in small ways, that compounds into relationships and reputation. But the reverse is also true. If you have a habit of procrastination, that compounds into missed opportunities. If you have a habit of consuming junk food, that compounds into disease. If you have a habit of spending everything you earn, that compounds into financial stress. If you have a habit of criticism and negativity, that compounds into isolation. Your habits are either compounding in your favor or compounding against you. There is no neutral. Every repeated action is either multiplying your potential or multiplying your problems. This is why successful people are often fanatical about their habits, not because they're naturally disciplined, but because they understand the mathematics. They know that habits are compounding machines that run 24/7, and they want those machines working for them, not against them. Here's a practice I've maintained for over 50 years. Every quarter, I audit my habits. I write down everything I do consistently. Then I categorize each habit as either compounding positive value or compounding negative value. And then very deliberately, I work to eliminate one negative habit and strengthen one positive habit, just one each quarter. That might sound slow, but think about the mathematics. 4 new positive habits per year compounded over decades. That's transformational. That's the difference between an extraordinary life and an ordinary one. Not because of one dramatic change, but because of consistent, compound improvement in the systems that run your life. Let me share something that might surprise you. The most valuable compounding I've done has nothing to do with money. It's been in relationships. Because relationships, when nurtured properly, compound more powerfully than almost anything else. Think about it. When you meet someone new, the relationship is worth whatever value that one connection provides. But if you invest in that relationship over years, if you're there for them, if you share experiences and challenges and growth, something remarkable happens. The relationship deepens. Trust compounds. Understanding compounds. The value of that connection multiplies exponentially. And then it goes further. That deep relationship introduces you to others. Your friend's network becomes partially available to you because they trust you. Their knowledge becomes partially available to you because they're willing to share. Their opportunities become partially available to you because they think of you when good things arise. One deep relationship compounds into a web of connections that creates value you couldn't have imagined at the beginning. I've had friendships that started 60 years ago that are still paying dividends today. Not because I was strategic about them, but because I was genuine, because I invested consistently in being the kind of friend who adds value without expecting immediate return, because I understood that relationships compound better than stocks if you nurture them properly. But here's what most people get wrong about relationships. They try to network. They try to collect contacts. They're adding people to their LinkedIn like they're collecting baseball cards. And they wonder why nothing compounds. Because you can't compound superficial connections. You can only compound genuine relationships. And genuine relationships require time, consistency, and care. The same principle applies to your reputation. Your reputation is simply the compound interest of your actions over time. Every time you do what you say you'll do, you're making a deposit. Every time you act with integrity when it's costly, you're making a deposit. Every time you help someone without expecting anything in return, you're making a deposit. For years, these deposits seem to earn nothing. People take advantage of your honesty. Your integrity costs you opportunities. Your generosity goes unrecognized. This is when most people quit. They think being good doesn't pay. I should be more ruthless. But they're making the classic mistake. They're thinking in addition when they should be thinking in multiplication. They're looking for immediate returns when they should be building compound growth, because after enough years, after enough consistent deposits, something shifts. Your reputation becomes your greatest asset. Doors open because of who you are, not just what you can do. Opportunities come to you instead of you chasing them. Trust becomes your currency, and it's worth more than gold. I've built a reputation over decades for saying what I think, even when it's unpopular, for admitting when I'm wrong, for never pretending to know what I don't know. Early in my career, this cost me. People thought I was naive, unsophisticated, not strategic enough, but I kept making those deposits, kept being honest when dishonesty would have been easier, kept being clear when ambiguity would have been safer. Now that reputation is priceless. People trust what I say because I've earned it over decades. I don't need to convince anyone of my honesty. The compound interest of consistent character has done that for me. That's the power of long-term thinking, of understanding that who you are today is just one data point, but who you are consistently over decades becomes your identity. And here's the beautiful paradox of compound interest in life. The more you have, the faster it grows. Not just in money, but in everything. The more knowledge you have, the easier it is to acquire new knowledge. The more skills you have, the faster you can learn new skills. The more relationships you have, the easier it is to build new relationships. The more reputation you have, the more opportunities come to find you. This is why the rich get richer. Not because the system is rigged, though sometimes it is, but because compound interest accelerates over time. The person who's been investing for 30 years has such a massive advantage over the person starting today, not just because they have more capital, but because they've learned how to let money work for them. They've developed the patience, the systems, the knowledge. All of that compounds too. But don't let this discourage you if you're starting late. Let it motivate you. Because even though you can't recover lost time, you can start compounding today. And today's small actions, if sustained, will create tomorrow's exponential results. The person who starts at 40 and compounds for 20, 5 years will be far ahead of the person who starts at 20 and quits at 25. It's not when you start, it's that you start and that you never stop. Let me tell you about the most important compounding decision I ever made. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about career. It was about learning. I decided very early that I would become a learning machine, that I would never stop being curious, that I would read, study, ask questions, and think deeply about everything that interested me. This decision has compounded for over 60 years. Each book made the next book more valuable. Each insight made the next insight easier to grasp. Each field of knowledge I explored made connections with other fields. My understanding didn't add up. It multiplied. It exploded. It became something I couldn't have imagined at the beginning. And this compounded learning created opportunities I never sought. It helped me avoid mistakes that destroyed others. It allowed me to see patterns that were invisible to people who stopped learning decades ago. It made me valuable to partners and friends and businesses in ways that had nothing to do with my formal education. If I could give you one piece of advice about applying compound interest to your life, it would be this: become a learning machine. Read every day. Think every day. Question every day. Let your curiosity compound. Because knowledge, more than any other asset, multiplies its own value. The more you know, the more you can learn. The more you can learn, the more you can do. The more you can do, the more value you can create. And value is what the world rewards. But remember, all compounding requires patience. It requires faith. It requires the courage to do what seems insignificant today, because you understand it will become significant tomorrow. Most people don't have this courage. They want results now. They want proof before they commit. They want to see the exponential curve before they start climbing it. But that's not how it works. You have to start before you see results. You have to trust the mathematics before you see the magic. You have to believe in multiplication while everyone around you is celebrating their additions.